Happening. So a proper good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to our final graduate and student event for the month of April. We normally run these career networking events in person at our offices. Actually, we've also run them previously in offices in town. So this is obviously our first one online, like everybody else. This is how we've had to do it. But we've actually found that they've been quite beneficial because we've done them in a different way, and it's an opportunity for people to hear directly from people who have perhaps trodden similar paths to the paths that they're treading right now, and really to hear exactly sort of what your career paths are and what you've learned along the way, what's gone well, what hasn't gone so well, but how you've managed to get to where you are today. So thank you to all the professionals for coming along today, and thank you to you, the graduates and students, for making the time. I hope it's going to be a useful evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Melanie Pearl, and I am an employment advisor and employment programme manager at Work Avenue. I meet with people on a one-to-one basis to talk about what they want to do next in their careers, help them to find their way really into their next job, and really have the resources for doing that. So looking at having a CV and having a good cover letter, being able to adapt that, and everything else that's needed to look for a job. And my background is actually HR. We've got a couple of HR professionals on the call tonight. My background is also HR. I started at Legal and General, worked in local government for a while in HR. Then I was the HR director at the United Synagogue. And about 10 years ago, I started up my own HR consultancy. I mostly work with SMEs now, and I do that alongside my work at Work Avenue. And joined today by Hannah Dehaan, who's another employment advisor, and just ask you to say a few words about yourself as well, Hannah.
Yes, hi, I'm Hannah Dehaan. I'm one of the employment advisors like Mel at Work Avenue. So I've been working in the education sector for about 10 years and joined Work Avenue just over a year ago. So I graduated with a qualification in careers guidance in about 2010. And if anybody needs any additional help after the event tonight, please get in touch with us and we can help you with things like looking for jobs, help you with your CV, help you apply for any postgraduate courses, etc.
Great, thanks very much, Hannah. And just to let you know that we have another employment advisor, Richard Linden, as well, who's not on the call tonight, and our job placements manager, Yael Solomons, and we're headed up our team by our Director of Operations and Employment, Emma May, all of whom make up our employment team, and we also have a business team as well. Do have a look at our website, lots of events going on which are free of charge, and also one-to-one sessions, which we're very happy to help you at whenever the time is right. But let's get started today. So I'm just going to ask each of you to say a little bit about what you've done and what your pathway is, and then we will open the floor out to questions. So I'm going to start with the HR representatives, if that's okay. Then we've got people from fashion, and we have Abby, who's an event manager, or probably doesn't do you justice, so I'm sure you will be able to describe in more detail for us. Thank you, Abby. So if we can start with Gemma, if that's okay. Gemma Freer.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Thanks so much for having me this evening. So a little bit about myself. As Melanie said, I do work in human resources. I kind of always thought that it might be the path for me. When I was at school, I did a lot of work experience in different industries and companies, and I found that HR quite suited my personality. I'm quite organized. I like to have variety in my job every day, and I definitely get that from working in HR, I have to say. So a little bit about me before I started work. So I went to Leeds University and I studied psychology, graduated in 2015 and basically went straight into work. Although looking back, I probably would have benefited from some time maybe going traveling like my brother did, but I was just head set on starting work straight away. And I got an internship at General Electric in their healthcare division. Definitely applied to a lot more companies before I got my first job. Went through assessment centers and loads of interviews. Some, I didn't even get past the telephone interview, and some I was more successful in. But ultimately I chose General Electric as my first job. And it was an 18-month internship where I really got to kind of understand the role of HR administration, which is really where anyone needs to start. If you want to be involved in HR, you really kind of have to work your way up the ranks, I would say. And this was like a super interesting role. I loved the fact that it was a really big global company. I could work with colleagues all over the world. They had, core values and training that I could be involved in. And it was just, I loved the fact that I was working in such a big corporate company. They unfortunately couldn't keep me on full time because it was an internship. So I had to find another role after that and moved to a smaller property company, still doing HR admin, but kind of getting a bit more into the HR advisor side of the role, which was really interesting for me. So I would definitely say I learned a lot there. But I have to say, I think working in a corporate global company was really more for me and suited my personality. So I made the decision to move, and now I work at Morgan Stanley, which is an investment bank. Been there for about 3.5 years now. Absolutely love it. I got promoted when after a couple of years. So it's been a really positive experience for me. And yeah, I really love what I do every day. And as I said, it's super varied. Every day really is different and full of surprises. But I also get to work with some really lovely people. So that's a bit about me.
Great, thank you very much. And are you in a generalist role at Morgan?
Yes, so we're called HR business partners, but yes, it's a very generalist role. I've kind of stepped away from the admin piece now and moved more on advisory. So really dealing with clients and employees every single day, and their weird and wonderful stories and things that I can help them with.
And just one other question for me. How easy was it to transfer into an organisation like Morgan Stanley? Because people often say, well, I'd love to work somewhere like that, but it's so competitive and hard to get in.
The application process was definitely probably longer than the other few companies that I'd worked at. But I think because I'd already worked in quite a big company such as General Electric, I was used to the structure and the hierarchy and like the vastness of working in that kind of company. And I really enjoy it. I know it's not for everyone. They use the phrase, you're a small fish in a big pond, but I think you can really make an impact and kind of, get involved in so many different things and meet so many different people. It's just so varied. And I particularly enjoy it.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And moving on to Rachel, if that's okay.
Hi, I am Rachel Harris. I graduated in 2008 from University of Manchester. I did a degree in American Studies. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do when I left university, and leaving in 2008 meant that I hit the last major recession. So the thing I would say is, to people graduating around about now, is don't panic. It will be okay. It might look a bit hopeless at the moment because of the current situation, but it will get better.
And voices like yours at the moment, actually.
It will get better. So I didn't know what I was going to do. So I did a few temp jobs initially, went back to my master's in history, and then I had a feeling I might be quite good at HR. I'm very good with people. So I just applied for a load of admin jobs. Like Gemma, you have to start at the bottom and start working with admin. I hated my first HR job. It was for an actuarial consultancy, but I saw what my managers were doing and it looked really interesting, especially looking at casework, the HR advisory side. I then went to work for a couple of different charities. I really wanted to work in the charity sector at the time, including Norwood, Jewish charity, so working in adults with learning disabilities, mainly in recruitment. Then eventually moved on working in university sector, starting to work into HR partnering, so working with doing casework, disciplinaries, grievances, sickness absence, all kinds of different things. And I did spend 6 months in the civil service, which I also didn't like, but that was another blip. That was a very strange situation. I started just as the Brexit vote happened, and the department I went into was merged with another one, and the job I was recruited for didn't exist, and they gave me something else, and it wasn't great. But that meant I moved to my current place, which is University of London, which I really like. I've been there just for 4 years. That's the longest I've ever been anywhere. And I'm now working in change. I've started moving into a specialism, so focused on change partnering. So doing things like transfers of staff, doing things like restructures, some redundancies, whole mix of things, which I really enjoy. It's really interesting. It can be difficult, especially at the moment when dealing with things like redundancies, but it is really interesting, and it's really great working with individuals and with managers, trying to help them find the right solutions. Yeah, that's my a potted history.
That's really helpful. Thank you. It's interesting you say potted history, because, you know, whose career actually goes in a straight line. And I think, you know I speak to a lot of clients who expect it to go in a straight line. You know, this is what I expect to do. Looking back, would you have done anything differently, or do you think actually even some of those experiences that weren't quite as you wanted them to be were actually worthwhile in the end?
The civil service job was a blip, but at the same time, if I hadn't taken that, I probably would have, I don't know if I would have ended up in the place where I am now, and I've actually done really well where I am now. I've been promoted once. I've also had acting up responsibilities twice. I've had the opportunity to manage my own team for a short while, which was something I hadn't done before. So yeah, I'd say that was probably the biggest blip. Yeah. But other than that, it's got, I'd say it goes like that, and eventually you find a place that you're really happy with.
Sure. Great, thank you very much. So if I can ask all the students and graduates who are here, any questions you have, please put them in the chat. We will come back to HR. So we're covering 3 different careers, well, broadly speaking, 3 different career options this evening, but we will come back. So please put any questions that you have in the chat, and obviously you'll get a chance to also ask any in person if you would like. So I'm just going to move on to events management now, and to Avi Schlagman, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problems. Hello, everyone. So where do I start? So I have got a degree in hospitality management. At the time when you're going through the UCAS handbook, you know, wondering what you're going to do in university, I was never a self-proclaimed academic. So, you know, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do university. So I'm going through the UCAS handbook thinking, right, I'm not an accountant. I'm not going to do property. Oh, hospitality sounds like fun. That's what I chose to do. So I did a 3-year degree in hospitality management at Middlesex University, and then all very excited to start going into work, and went traveling before I went into a job. And then September 11th happened, September 2001. So the hospitality industry basically, excuse the pun, but, you know, went completely down. People were firing, not hiring. So I had to already at the start, even before I'd started in hospitality, had to kind of take a slight detour. And I started my first proper job was at the Jewish agency, working in the Aliyah department, actually working on events in Israel for them. And then when the opportunity came along, I took it and started in hotels. Now, my first hospitality job, my first proper hospitality job, was at what was the Langham Hilton on Portland Place. And how I got that job, it's all about who you know, not what you know. So my brother, excuse it, it's a long-winded, but somebody my brother went to school with, who now I've known over 30 years, was in this current job, and I happened to be talking to him, and he said, look, I'm looking to leave, I'm setting up my own company, why don't you come take over from me, or come for an interview, come take over from me, and and I'll teach you the ropes, and then within 6 months I'm gone, and you can take over from me. So I went for an interview, ended up interviewing with 4 or 5 people at the time, so it wasn't a given job, but got the job as a special events manager, so looking after, at the time the Langham had an in-house kosher kitchen, so it was about £750,000 worth of business to the hotelier. So not a small job to start your hospitality career in, but as planned, I went in as assistant special events manager, took over from this friend of mine, and then took over from him, and then I was there for about 2.5 years. Now, after about 2 years, there was talk that the hotel was going to be closing completely for refurbishment, which they did. So I started looking for my next role. My next role was in outside catering. The caterer doesn't exist anymore, but at the time she was one of the top 2 or 3 kosher caterers in London, and I ended up being banqueting manager there. Again, it was through contacts. So somebody that I had met during my time at the Langham said, "Oh, why don't you think about this person?" That was Carol Sobel at the time. I don't know whether anyone knows her, but she was one of the top 2 caterers at the time. So I ended up working for her for a couple of years. Very difficult working, to be honest, in a family-run business. There was Carol herself, her daughter, her son, and then there was me. So however much they like to welcome you into the family, you're very limited to where you're going to get, because you're not actually part of the family. But it worked very well. I learned lots. I worked in some fantastic places, one of them being Windsor Castle at the time. I actually looked out the window and the Queen was walking around with her corgis. So some fantastic experience I gained there. But, as I said, very hard working in a family-run business. So I was with somebody else at the time. I was working with somebody else at the time. We were having a conversation thinking, look, we've done this for years. Why don't we go and, set up on our own? And we did. For about 18 months, we had a very successful event management company. But after about 18 months, the recession hit. The first thing to go were the luxuries, like party planners in our industry. People were planning things themselves. They were doing smaller things themselves because of the recession. So in this industry, you've got money coming in when you've got events coming in, and with no events, no money. My wife fell pregnant with my first child, and I needed something stable to go into. So I went on caterer.com, Indeed, all the job boards. At the time, you didn't really have things, I'm going to sound old now, but you didn't really have things like LinkedIn, or if it was, it wasn't as popular and as useful as it is now. So I used the old school job boards and ended up getting a job at the Village Hotel in Elstree, working as their director of events there. Again, it was quite a lengthy process to get that job. Went through 3 interviews, one with the director of sales, one with the hotel manager, and then with the owner of the hotel. Was there for 4 years, built that up. The hotel was a year old when I started, and I was there for 4 years, so built that up to quite a reputable business. But I always wanted to go back into central London. Central London really has a buzz about it, and I wanted to get back into central London. After about 3 years at the Village, and sorry, I do have a long history, so sorry if I go over the 5 minutes, but after about 3 years, I was looking to leave there, and I applied for a job with the Radisson Hotel Group, and I didn't get the role. I didn't even get an interview. Didn't think anything about it, but 9 months later, the same job came up, and I went for the job. I had an interview on Monday. I had a recall on the Wednesday, and I had a job offer on the Friday. So one lesson that I would say is never give up. If you see something that you want and you don't get it the first time and you see it again, go for it again, because you have no idea of the circumstances why you didn't get it the first time, and the circumstances why you didn't get it, why you did and hopefully will get it the second time. So I ended up working for the Radisson Group, overseeing meetings and events for 2 hotels, with a target of about £1.8 million a year. After 2 years, I had the opportunity and was offered a promotion by my then general manager at the time, who was promoted to commercial director of the company. He asked me to go over to the commercial side with him, and then I was promoted to general manager of meetings and events for the group, so overseeing 12 hotels with a 40 million plus pound budget. So, you know, moving up the ranks, as it were, in that company. And again, very different working for a family run business where there's 2 or 3 people, working for I would say, £1 billion company with 1,500 people in the company. And I oversaw directly and indirectly about 40 people there. And now, finally, I moved on after 5 years there. I always missed the private event side of things. So I'm now currently director of operations for a company called Musica. We offer live entertainment and production services for both the private sector and the corporate sector. And I've been there 2 years, currently on flexi furlough, building up to hopefully what will be the opening of our industry on the 21st of June. And that's me in a very, I've tried to be as quick as I could, but as I said, a 20-year history is quite difficult to put into 5 minutes.
What was really interesting, I mean, it was all very interesting, but what was really interesting in hearing your history is that, you know, you start small. Sometimes you start in a family industry, and it is hard, but it leads to other things. And then the other thing that was interesting to hear was you went back to somewhere that you'd applied for a little while ago. And I often hear clients, often have clients saying to me, you know, it only happened just last week, that somebody said to me, should I reapply? You know, yes, it's always worth it.
It was interesting because I found out that the first time I went for it, the person that was looking over it was a different person offering the first interview the first time than it was the second time. So they obviously saw my CV, you know, thought no, but 9 months later, exactly the same role, somebody has looked at it differently and, you know, asked me to come in, and it's gone from there. So as I said, don't give up. You know, if that's what you want to do, you'll find a way to do it.
Oh, and good luck, and I hope things return to some form of normality for you, for all of us, but for you especially in your industry. I'm going to move on, just because of time, to fashion now, to the last of our sectors this evening. I mean, I'm putting it sort of in one, I suppose, but if we move on to Danielle, who's actually a buyer, and just ask you to tell us a little bit about your career.
Well, I'm actually not a buyer anymore, but that's where I did start. No, it's okay. It's an interesting story. I promise you that. So I always knew from a young age I wanted to get into fashion. It was something that ran in my blood because it ran in my family, and I was always very creative and designing from a very young age. So I used to think I was one of the lucky ones. I always knew what direction I wanted to go in, what I wanted to study at university. So when I got to uni, when I was applying for university, I thought, okay, I have the option to do fashion design, but then I also enjoyed like business studies at school, and I had a head for numbers. I could take after my dad in that respect. So I thought about what course could I do that combined the two. And also my family were very much like, do something creative, like you want to do your fashion, but also think about your career like long term, which is why I incorporated the business side of it. So I studied at Manchester Metropolitan University, and I did international fashion marketing. So I learned about fashion design and buying, and all the creative side, as well as finance and marketing as well. So it was a good like all-round course. So I did that for 4 years, and I had a year in industry in that course, which I worked for a supplier, working on the supplier side, supplying to high street brands. So that really gave me an insight onto that side of the industry, and it allowed me to talk to people working in the factories right at the beginning of like producing clothes, and then also working with buyers at the brands that I applied to. So I kind of got a good basis there. And I graduated in 2009, and I was thinking, okay, what career path do I want to go down? So I looked at all the different fashion avenues, and I spoke to people I knew in the industry, which I think is a really good thing to do, you know, speak to as many people you know already in that career. And I decided to go down the buying route because it combined the creativity with the business and with the numbers and the negotiation and everything that I enjoyed from my business course as well. So when I was applying for jobs, I applied on recruiters' websites. I spoke to recruiters. I also used to write a list of all the different brands at the nearest shopping centre. Then I'd sit on my computer and I'd Google them all and see if they had any vacancies going. And if they didn't, if it was a brand I really wanted to work for, I would contact them directly, just even if they didn't have any jobs. I kind of did that relentlessly. And then I saw a job advertised for a brand that doesn't exist anymore, but it's called Viella. It used to be owned by Austin Reed. Again, that's not really around anymore. And we used to, when I did my placement year, we used to supply to Viella. So I thought, okay, how can I kind of get ahead of, get my CV to the top of the pile? So I spoke to someone I used to work with who knew someone who used to work there. And I submitted my CV through the website, but then they also put a word in for me. So I got an interview that way. And then when I got an interview and I went to meet them, and they were, you know, happy to trial me. And I started as a buyer's admin assistant. Another thing I liked about the fashion buying route was it was a career ladder, because for those of you that know a bit more about fashion, you start at the bottom as a buyer's admin assistant, and then you can go to assistant buyer, then there's junior buyer, then there's buyer, then there's buyer, you know, there's all this kind of, and I like that like direction. So I was working for Viella for 18 months before I was promoted to senior buyer's admin assistant, and then I moved. Austin Reed Group owned a few different brands. So then I got promoted again as an assistant buyer, but moved across to another brand called Country Casuals. Then I was in the whole company for 3 years and I wanted to change. So I started applying again. And it is a very tough industry because it's very competitive. And more now than back then, but even back then, retail is very volatile. As you know, you're probably reading all the time about, you know, Topshop doesn't really exist anymore, only on ASOS. You know, it's a very volatile industry. So you want to keep moving as well as you don't want to stay too long in the same place. So I then moved to another company called the Style Group Brands, and they owned at that point 9 brands under their umbrella. And I started on a brand called Précy, which is one of their petite brands. And I kind of moved around the company, and I was there for 5 years. And until 2018, when the company actually went into administration. So during my 8 years working in buying, I really enjoyed it. I had a passion for fashion without, you know, making it right. But I had a passion for it. I had a drive. You know, I worked really hard to get to where I was, but I think I'd reached personally the point where I kind of fell out of love with it a bit, and I wanted to change, but I wasn't sure which direction to go. I was kind of a bit scared to start at the bottom again, and I was a bit unsure of which direction to take. But I started doing a lot of reading into different industries. I had built up a really versatile skill set whilst working in buying, which could translate to other roles and other industries. And I think, so when the company went into administration, I decided to take a few months out. It was over the summer. I traveled for 4 months, and then I came back with a fresh head, and I thought, right, I'm going to speak to some recruiters across a few different industries and speak to a few different people in different industries to see what really appealed to me. And I just happened to speak to a recruiter, if any of you have heard of them, called Office Angels. I don't think they're that exclusive to fashion. I think they do a few different. I spoke to the recruiter there, and she said, well, actually, you're perfect for this role that's come up. It's a bit of a hard one to explain. She didn't really know how to explain it to me, so she tried to. But basically, I now work for an American tech company, and they have a software. It's a predictive analytics software. And they work with global brands like all across the world. And they were looking for buyers or ex-buyers to come on board as account managers and help different brands. So I manage the Marks and Spencer's account, just to put it into context now. And what I do, I run a team, there's 5 of us, and I work with the buyers and designers and merchandisers and a lot of different roles across Marks and Spencer's using the software that I work for this American company for. And I help them make better decisions in the products that they're going to design, the products they decide to buy to put into store, pricing of their products, marketing, the packaging designs. So I kind of relate to the buyers because I know using the software, the company that I work for, how useful that would have been in my previous career. So I've had to learn a whole new skill set as well as using my original. So I'm using like computer, like technology and algorithms and everything like that. But I'm still also got my buying head on. So I make recommendations to the buyers at Marks and Spencer's, etc. And I've been doing this role I've been in the company for 2.5 years. I've moved up really quickly. I started just as very junior. I've been promoted 3 times, I think it is now, in 2.5 years. And you know, Marks and Spencer's account, we work with like John Lewis and H&M as well. So we work with big brands. And I've still got that passion for retail and passion for like the fashion industry, but now working on this side of it, I'm really making more of an influence to help bring the customer's voice, is what we do really, into helping these brands make better decisions. So it's definitely the way of the future of the fashion industry. So even though I've kind of gone off a bit from what I thought would be a dedicated like career ladder, I've kind of gone on to, I would never have even imagined of ending up here. But it goes to show that you start off thinking one way, but other opportunities come. You need to speak to as many different people as possible, network as much as possible, read up on things.
Good advice, such good advice. It's all about, talking to people. The more people you talk to, the more that's going to lead you to your
next definitely
career. I think that's a theme that's run through what you've said and so many of the other professionals today, and actually on other evenings that we've had, is that it is about who you speak to, and you never know, jobs will be put to you that you didn't even think of, you didn't even know about before. Thank you very much, Danielle. Just moving on to Zoe, last but not least, who also works in fashion. Hopefully I've got that right.
Also in buying. This time I actually still work in buying.
Okay, I'll have to make the distinction for us then, because that will be useful.
So I decided that I wanted to do buying when I was 16. Up until then, I had wanted to do musical theatre. But when it came to the point of deciding on A-levels and then deciding what I wanted to study at university, my parents gave me a bit of a reality check, and they were like, do you want to be a music teacher? And I said, no, really not for me, do not want to teach. But what am I going to do? Like, this is all I've thought about. And I thought about things that, I did want out of a job. I wanted to be able to move around a lot. I didn't want to be behind a desk the whole time. I wanted something that was different, something that was creative. And my parents said, well, we have a cousin who works in buying. Why don't you speak to her and ask her a bit about her job? So after speaking with her, I decided, this is what I'm going to do. I hadn't done any work experience at that point, but I was like, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to study this at this university. So I decided I wanted to do fashion buying and merchandising at London College of Fashion. And that was the only place I wanted to study. So I went about doing everything I could to make that happen. So I got through this cousin, I got a week of work experience. I took on an extra, I can't remember what it's called, an EPQ in sixth form. So an extra A-level that I wrote a dissertation about fashion. And I got into this course. And throughout that course, again, it was encouraged, get experience. If you want to work in buying, really, if you haven't worked in retail, you're putting yourself at risk of being overlooked when you're applying. So I worked in retail for 2 different companies. I got an internship while I was still at uni, so part-time, in a very small family-owned fashion company. where I was doing like part-time stuff with online and involved in the buying process. And then in my last year of uni, we had to do a placement for a month. And I really struggled to find one, actually. And I was very lucky that my university managed to set one up for me with ASOS. And my placement with ASOS, because it was a month, whereas I'd only done a week in other places, that was my reality check with buying. People think of it as a very glamorous job. It is not a glamorous job. I spent my entire month boxed up in a sample room, covered in dust, holes in my clothes from hangers. But throughout that, I was like, yeah, I'm really enjoying like the creative side of it, like seeing the thought processes behind picking different outfits and like, you know, what goes where and what's sold when. So I still decided I wanted to do it, but I couldn't wait to get out of ASOS. The week after I finished, I got put with Charles Tyrwhitt, which is a menswear brand. Where my cousin knew someone who worked there and she put me in touch with her. And I did this week at Charles Tyrwhitt and I was like, this is where I want to work. Because there's, in fashion, you have different companies have different kind of atmospheres. And a lot of them, unfortunately, are quite toxic, like I found at ASOS, where there isn't a lot of camaraderie. It's very much like you will step on each other to get where you want. Whereas when I went to Charles Tyrwhitt, it's a slightly smaller business than ASOS, and it was a lot more of a family feel. And the woman who I got the experience through gave me one of the best pieces of advice that I'd received, where she said, any of these experiences that you do, keep in touch with the people you need those experiences with, because they're going to be your contacts that you need when you graduate. So I latched onto her. And I would, email her every now and again, giving her an update on how my degree is going, asking her if she could help me with a thing on my dissertation. I decided to take a year out, and I moved to Australia for a year. But even then, I knew that I was going to come back and that Charles Tyrwhitt was where I wanted to work. So I got myself a retail job, which, like I said, is very important if you want to work in buying, in their competitor TM Lewin. And they all knew there at the time. I was like, I'm using this for experience to get back to Charles Tyrwhitt, just so you know. And then as I was planning to come back to the UK, I saw a role in an entry-level job being advertised at Charles Tyrwhitt. So I put in my application and then I sent an email off to the woman that I had worked with when I was there. And I said, by the way, I'm still Australia. By the way, could you maybe put in a good word for me? And that was my foot in the door, because like Danielle was saying, it's very, very competitive and it's very hard, especially to get your first job when all anyone wants is experience. So this contact was really what helped me get that job. She put my CV forward and she was quite high up in the business as well. And through that, I got into Charles Tyrwhitt. I've been there for 4 years now. It's worth mentioning I am still a buying assistant. Progression in buying can be very, very slow because of how competitive it is. It is right place at the right time. And again, I'll echo what Danielle said, moving around is really where you're going to get your progression. I stayed because I was very happy where I am. But yeah, it's not glamorous. It is a lot of admin. Don't go into it and think that it is going to be going to fashion shows and sitting there and saying, yes, I want that. Yes, I want that. It's not like that. I spend most of my days, like I said, sitting on the floor, covered in dust, sorting through samples. But there are really rewarding aspects of it, walking into a shop and seeing, this shirt and being like, I know the whole story behind this. I know what a challenge it was for it to get here. It's a creative job. It is a job where you need a lot of organization and it can be very rewarding, but be wary of progression and competition in the industry. That would be my main advice.
Great, thank you very much, Zoe. Such a great insight, it really is, because I think that's the thing. It does appear so glamorous, and aspects of it are. I could hear the enthusiasm in your voice, in both of your voices, you as well, Danielle, and actually everybody who's spoken today.
If you're working for a good company, samples, so definite perk.
Yeah, And I have also heard about the competitiveness within certain industries. So that's there, and or certain sort of organisations that is there. So how do you, just before we kind of move on, because I can see that there's a question on the HR side as well, but on the fashion side, and if anyone else has any questions, please do either put them in the chat or just raise your hand, or very small groups, I'm sure you can let us know that you want to speak. But I suppose, Zoe, asking you first, how do you hope your career will progress from here?
Like Danielle said, there is a very, very clear career progression. You have levels that you can't skip. You can't say like, I'm really, really good at my job, I'm going to skip a couple of levels and go to the top because I'm good enough for that. So I do see my career progressing. Personally, I do want to make Aliyah, and buying isn't such a career option in Israel. So there will be some sideways moving possibly into purchasing, which uses very similar skill set, just it's slightly more logistical as well. But there is, while I'm here, there is a very, very clear progression, but I will probably have to move around a bit in order to attain that.
Okay, thank you very much. Hannah, do we have any questions? Oh, you're on mute, Hannah.
Sorry about that. So we've got a question in the chat from Elise. I'm studying psychology and I have only recently started to consider HR, so I haven't really had the opportunity to gain any work experience. A lot of the HR roles, even admin ones, have knowledge of specific HR systems as requirements, which I don't have. Would you advise to still try and apply for these roles, or to try and get experience first?
Thank you. Very, very interesting question, Elise, and one that I get asked a lot about HR. Put that one to you, Gemma.
Or Rachel, did you want to go first?
Oh, I don't mind.
I'll ask both of you. I don't mind who starts.
I mean, I was going to say it probably depends. I would say a lot of admin roles, it might if it has it as an essential, then there might be a reason for that. But even then, I would say you never know. I mean, if you can do 60 to 80% of the role, if you've got other skills where you've actually got something else that, you know, if you look at everything else and you're like, I can do 60 to 80% of this, then throw an application in. You never know. But otherwise, if it's asking for considerable experience in a system, it might be that you need to look for another level down, possibly.
Yeah, I would probably say the same thing. I think on the other side, you know, getting work experience is super important, because even if you do a week at one company, you may get access to these kind of systems, and then you can put that on your CV straight away. I think, you know, with any entry level role, they don't expect you to be an expert in certain systems. Sometimes it's just, you know, a perk or a nice to have if someone has that experience. So I don't think there's any harm in trying to put forward an application, you know, explaining on a cover letter the parts of the job that you can do, and hoping for the best. But I think getting work experience, from my experience, has been super important, even if it's just for a week or two.
And what advice would the two of you give to actually get work experience, getting experience in HR, which is notoriously competitive to get? How do you go about it?
I mean, for me, I had just admin experience in non-HR jobs. So I'd done some temp admin, and because I'd done the temp admin, it meant I had all the other stuff. I didn't have the HR specific stuff, but I had the general admin work. So by the time an HR job came up, they were like, well, they haven't got HR, but she's got admin. She can do everything else. So it meant that I was able to go in on that basis. So yeah, my work experience was weird and wonderful, but it had nothing to do with what I do now. I thought I wanted to do something to do with history or museums. So I worked in an auction house. And then I thought I wanted to be a journalist. So I think a couple of different newspapers I did work experience. So even if your work experience is not necessarily relevant to what you finally decide to do, it's still all good stuff.
That's really,
I
really
agree.
important to hear directly from you as the professionals, actually, because it's something that we talk a lot, transferable skills, really letting people know what those are. But I guess the important thing is you tell the employer, you have to explain how those skills match. That's what really matters.
I think, sorry, just to say, another thing is just utilize your network. Add people on LinkedIn, message them, if you have as a couple of people said, friends or family friends who work in specific industries, ask them, and sometimes they can put a good word in for you. A couple of my work experiences have been through kind of family and friends who work in other companies. So I would definitely say utilize your network.
Lovely, thank you very much. And Hannah, I think we've got another question.
Yeah.
On the fashion side.
Yeah, so a question from Agni. Thank you, Danielle and Zoe. May I ask how COVID affected the industry and changed the work dynamics and recruitment process for fashion?
Lovely. Ask you, Danielle.
Yeah, no, Zoe might be able to answer this in terms of internally working for a company. COVID has changed it a lot in terms of buying and design. Like, it's not so seasonal anymore. Obviously, when the stores have been closed, it's shifted everything majorly with the whole industry. So a lot of brands put everything into deep storage that they think they can sell this year. There's a lot of waste, there's a lot of catching up to do. And think in terms of Zoe, you might be able to add more to that, but in terms of the recruitment process for fashion, from my understanding, from being quite close to the guys at M&S, it's difficult because a lot of stores and businesses have struggled. So a lot of retailers have not survived, as we know. So those people that are working, were working, they've been made redundant. So I think it's even more competitive now because there are less places to work. However, I feel that people are adapting quite quickly and building new brands. I think I know a few people that have still managed to get jobs in the industry even now. So I do think it's still worth applying for them. Don't give up. I think, even if just network as much as possible. Is fashion, is that kind of the industry you want to get into? I'm happy to give you some names of recruitment agents that I've used in the past that I know are kind of, good and contacts that way, that you might be speaking to them anyway, like Office Angels, for example. I don't know if you had heard of them. I know that we hire from them, and they're always looking for people. I do think it will pick up. I think obviously at the moment it's difficult because there's so many more people looking for jobs, but at the end of the day, people need clothes. That's never going to change. So, I'd keep going with it, and it will stabilize at some point, and it's just going to be more online.
Thank you very much. And to Zoe, how has this situation affected your area?
Yeah, you'll find that a lot of companies that are still around have restructured, meaning that a lot of roles got made redundant. So the workforce is a lot tighter. There are fewer jobs going than there would have been before the pandemic. But I have seen a lot of openings. There are a lot of people after the pandemic who are burning out, and it's opening up a lot of jobs. In my company alone, since we had our restructure, there have been so many jobs opening up. So yeah, I would also say, use contacts, have chutzpah, message people on LinkedIn. If you see that they work in that company, in that department, send them a message and say, I hear that there's a job going, can you give me a bit more insight about it? But yeah, don't give up. There are jobs going up. It is getting better now that the stores are open. There's more cash in the bank, so you can afford to hire more people.
Really
keep
good to
trying.
hear, really good to hear, because because we kind of feel that, and you read statistics and you think, well, actually, everybody's saying things are opening up, but to hear that you're actually seeing that's good. I just want to ask the same question to Abby. Abby, we lost your picture. I'm not sure whether you're still there. Oh yeah, you are. That's good. I just wanted to ask the same about the events.
It's the joys of being at home. My little 2-year-old.
Oh no, don't worry at all.
He's being dragged back out. Sorry, the question.
I know it's the worst hour actually if you've got a 2-year-old. I know.
I'm hiding in my bedroom. I thought I was safe.
But I just wanted, really, with your industry as well, and the events industry, how sort of whether there are jobs around, whether you're seeing that there are jobs now.
Jobs are starting to come back very, very, very slowly. Obviously, the last 18 months, there was a massive redundancy everywhere. The Radisson, again, who I used to work for, they made 1,500 out of 2,500 redundant, even more potentially. It's quite controversial. I think there's still some controversy in the way they did it, but that's a whole nother story. But they're building a brand new hotel in Leicester Square, which is opening in September. But that was meant to have opened last April. So everything from staff in the hotel to even the construction of the hotel got delayed. So now very, very slowly, but again, everything is very cautious about 21st of June. The restaurants in the hotels, for instance, only outside dining. So from the 17th of May, I think there's some inside, but everyone is waiting for the next announcement from Boris as to what they can do. And I think it will be at that stage where you'll see more and more and more. But I think, and probably the same in most industries, in terms of who they'll be hiring and what salaries they'll be offering. I think, unfortunately, because there'll be so many people wanting to go back into hospitality, the jobs that there were 2 years ago at a certain salary, they may come back, but at a lower salary. And I think that's where people wanting to get back in the industry will struggle. Not necessarily the entry level, because the entry level positions, if it's your first hospitality job, you don't know any better. But those trying to get back into hospitality, I think will struggle at the level in terms of salary with what they were getting before, unfortunately.
Then I guess it might be a way back in, but it depends what level you're at and whether you.
It's a catch-22 because venues and hotels, they want staff to come back, and really they want people with experience because they kind of want to get up and running straight away, but they can't take the mick and give a much lower salary but expect the same level of service that they expected when they got rid of you 2 years ago. So it's a real, I think they'll have to find a real balance, but yeah, it's everyone's on tender hooks for the next announcement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. We've got time just for one more question to any of the professionals. If anybody would like to know anything, this is your chance. No? Okay, well, just to say, sorry, something's just come up in the chat, so I'm just going to check whether that is a question. No, so it's more of a thank you. So so don't worry. So thank you. Just to say thank you ever so much to all of the professionals for giving up your time this evening. This is our smallest event. We've had a lot more students at all the others. We're not quite sure why. We don't know whether it's perhaps because people are concerned that these industries are quite competitive at the moment. But what we will be doing is we will be putting this video up on our website so that lots of people will really benefit from your expertise, and certainly we have in terms of talking to clients as well. So thank you so much for coming along and giving up an hour of your time in the evening, the worst possible time, Abby, I know, and to all of you, our students and graduates for coming along tonight. I hope you've learned something. I hope you found it helpful, and do feel free, if you haven't already, to come and make an appointment with us on a one-to-one basis. Have a look on our website. That's where our workshops are and various webinars as well. Thank you very much and all the very best. Good luck and good night.